Have you ever had a money or career question you really wanted to ask, but didn't know who to go to or just felt uncomfortable even bringing it up? You're not alone. Talking about money can feel intimidating, even scary. And that's exactly what I'm trying to change. That's why I created a free virtual coffee chat, a casual, no pressure 20-minute conversation where you can bring one thing you're wrestling with and we'll talk it through. No judgment, no jargon, no sales pitch, just clarity, ease, and a real answer from someone who gets it. If you've got something on your mind, don't sit in the confusion. Book a spot at limitfreelife.com and let's sip and sort it out. Hey there, and welcome to Money and You. I'm Michelle Perkins, your host. My search for more fulfilling work led me to career and business coaching, where I stumbled upon a game-changing discovery. Money issues often start with our mindset and habits. You see, our relationship with money is the key to overcoming those frustrating financial obstacles. As an entrepreneur, coach, and problem solver, I'm passionate about helping you create a great relationship with money. Because, turns out, that's the foundation for a limit-free life. Each week on Money and You, I speak with amazing guests about all things money, mindset, practical tips, and everything in between. We're here to give you new insights, education, and empowerment so money can be one of your favorite relationships. So join us for some lively conversations and let's transform your financial life together. Hello, and welcome to another great episode of the Money and You Show. I'm so happy you're here. I have a fantastic guest. We're going to have such a great conversation about retirement. What's different about retirement these days than what your parents or grandparents may have experienced, and how you can prepare, how you can make decisions, and how you can think about it in a positive way. So I have a guest in the studio today, which is thrilling when that happens. And so I'm going to introduce you to Dr. Gregg Lunceford, PhD. And he is going to walk us through some really interesting scenarios and ideas and thoughts around retirement. So, all righty, let's get to your information here. So Dr. Gregg Lunceford has 32 years of experience in financial services. He's a managing director, wealth advisor in Mesirow Wealth Management and vice chair of the Mesirow DEI Council. He creates comprehensive financial planning strategies for individuals, families, organizations, athletes, and business owners. He's the investment committee chair for the American Heart Association, on the board of directors for the Juvenile Protective Association, an advisory board member for the Nathan Manilow Sculpture Park at Governors State University, and is an advisory board member for the Quinlan School of Business at Loyola University. Gregg is also a featured speaker on WGN Radio's Your Money Matters. He's earned a BA from Loyola University and an MBA from Washington University. And there is something wrong with my notes where I can't see the end of this. Oh, here we go. And it has a PhD, the most important part, from Case Western Reserve University, where he conducted research on retirement. And he's a certified financial planner professional and holds a certificate in financial planning and something else that is not showing up on my phone, which I'm going to ask you about in just a second. Okay. So welcome.
Thank you for having me.
You're so welcome.
It's a pleasure to be with you.
It's a pleasure to be with you. And it's so great when somebody can actually be here in the studio with us and we can actually look at each other and talk without a screen. So thank you for that.
You're very welcome.
I know that's a bigger effort on your part to do that. So, okay. Well, you have a lot to help people with on the show, and this is all about educating people so they, can really relate to money in a more productive and, in a more positive way. So, why don't you introduce a little of the research that you do?
Sure.
Okay.
So thank you for having me as a guest, Michelle. And I just love what you talk about. When I came in the financial services over 30 years ago, we were taught that most money decisions were sort of like economic decisions.
Right.
You reacted certain ways simply because you could afford to do it or you couldn't afford to do it. And in the case of retirement, it was you could retire, and once you hit the number, you would automatically exit out, and it would be that simple. And after the real estate crisis of 2008, I started to notice that there was a pattern that I was seeing in clients and prospects that we couldn't solve for. And so I went to my firm at the time and I said, there's something social emotionally going on here. And they said, okay. And I came back and so
Did they give you that look?
They gave me that look. And the reason they were giving me the look, they were like, well, we can build products around financial risk, but we cannot build products around what someone is experiencing socially, emotionally.
Yeah.
And my point was, I think there's more to that, because I think if you understand some of the things that you talk about on the show and how people relate to money and what their experiences are and how they create those values and where they could have dysfunction, you could actually be more impactful in your client relationships. So no one really kind of took me seriously except a few people. And I said, well, if you give me a little time, can I just go back and study it? And so they were thoughtful enough to give me a few days here or there so I could have the flexibility to go and study it. And that's what I did my PhD research around it at Case Western. In particular, I was focused on retirees. But what you learn, that this is an issue at many stages of life. As you talk about in your prior shows, a lot of our money values come through experiences that we have in childhood. And what I get is the person entering into retirement that never understood that, never addressed that, and so now retirement looks very scary to them.
Yes, I love everything you just said, and I think it's so fascinating when you bring up, that social emotional aspect of it. And even though we all feel it all the time, intellectually, we're not putting that together. Like, that's how we make our decisions. But we're walking around all the time feeling certain things about money. And that was the thing that was fascinating to me, too, because I did have a finance and accounting background, and literally nobody had ever brought any of this up. And so even the people in the industry are feeling the same things. I mean, and so the decision making is hard. And retirement is one of the biggest decisions you'll make.
It is one of the biggest decisions you will make, and one of the things that I was trying to figure out is why so many people were having a hard time making retirement decisions. So let's back it up. It's 2008, like I was saying, and it's the real estate crisis, and people were losing their jobs all over the place. And I had a number of people come into my office that were offered very lucrative exit packages. And so once again, we were taught that retirement was an economic decision. As a matter of fact, and even some of the marketing that I saw competitors in the industry put out there, as well as could have been my firm as well, they would say, what's your retirement number? As if you hit this number, that was all you had to worry about, and that there were no other problems in life. And so what I was noticing was, these folks were coming in my office and they had very lucrative offers that would have set them up for life. In many cases, would have set their family up for generations. Yet they, because of this relationship they had with money, even though we would go through all these Monte Carlo analysis and I would show them this, and they would say, I'm still afraid I'm going to run out of money.
Well, and isn't part of that sort of an insecurity about how they'll manage this money? I mean, I don't know, but it seems like...
it's somewhat, but then also they had the foresight to seek out professional help as well. So, but there's still this uneasiness here. And so what I was noticing and was explaining in my firm was these sales cycles were taking a long period of time, right? And usually sales cycles take a long period of time when someone is thinking about it and they're like, I'll make the decision. But they were at the point where they had to make the decision. It was like, you got to take this offer in 30 days. Or we're going to move on to someone else. And usually you'll see this, a long sales cycle of someone selling a business or something like that, but never when there is immediate liquidity right in front of you, right? And so what the feedback I got was, well, it's probably us and another competitor, so if you discount the pricing, they'll go with us because all other things are equal. We would discount, the sales cycle wouldn't change. It was just long and long. And so what I started to dig in and started to talk to people about it and start to, read positive psychology and things like that, even though there wasn't a lot of academic literature at the time that linked money this way to the retirement experience. When we started talking about retirement, a lot of the research looked at retirement through the lens of gerontology. So it was what happens when you are retired, and it was really looking at retired people get old. So it was a lot of stuff about transitioning into old age. The new thing that most people aren't aware of, and is probably more noticed in other parts of the world, is there's an acknowledgement that we no longer go from youth to middle age to old age. But because we live longer, there's this thing called the third age, that you go from youth to middle age to the third age, then to old age.
I like that.
And so there's this 20
an
to
extra
30
age.
It's a 20 to 30 year life bonus.
Yeah.
That it's an undefined period that you never watched anybody else go through.
That's fascinating.
And what do I do with that? And then how do I afford that? And so that is creating a lot of people to have this negative thought about retirement, so they stick their head in the sand and then just hope for the best.
Yeah.
And so do you really want those years to be years where you're uncomfortable, or do you want to go into them bold and confidently?
Have you ever had a money or career question you really wanted to ask, but didn't know who to go to or just felt uncomfortable even bringing it up? You're not alone. Talking about money can feel intimidating, even scary. And that's exactly what I'm trying to change. That's why I created a free virtual coffee chat, a casual, no-pressure 20-minute conversation where you can bring one thing you're wrestling with and we'll talk it through. No judgment, no jargon, no sales pitch, just clarity, ease, and a real answer from someone who gets it. If you've got something on your mind, don't sit in the confusion. Book a spot at limitfreelife.com and let's sip and sort it out.
Boy, that is super interesting. I love anything that shifts how you think about things. So, and it's true. I mean, we all can see it, but we don't plan for it. We don't even acknowledge that that's the case. You know, we just think it's an extended old age period now.
Right.
But you're right. People are still, the whole, I don't know. What do you think about this retirement age of 65? Like, to me, that is such an antiquated
Well, when
thing.
you think about it, right, if you retire in your 60s, and I'm not even making this up, if you just look at the actuarial tables the IRS uses to calculate your required minimum distribution, right? They assume you're going to live to 90. So this isn't even Gregg's number. This is the IRS has said 90 is the number. So if you retire in your 60s, you're really middle age.
Good.
Right?
Because I'm there.
So 60 is the new 40. And so when you were 40 years old, when you were looking at your parents and grandparents and their life expectancy was 60 or 70, did you ever ask them if they threw in the towel at 40? No. They had endless hopes and possibilities for what was going to happen in the next 30 years.
Oh, I love that.
And that's how we need to envision the next 30 years when we're 60. But because we've had so many dynamic things happen to us, such as, you know, we're worried that our kids may not live to have as many benefits as we've had. And, you know, we have older parents and we're sandwiched in between. And, you know, many of us may be in split homes because of divorce and things like that. It is overwhelming.
Yeah.
And so I try to bring some normalcy to it and say, hey, let's step back, take a deep breath. It'll be fine. One of the things you have to get past, though, is the fear of addressing it.
Yeah, I love this, and I love how this intersects with people's career decisions, which is how I started my business as a career transition coach, which I still do. And so I'm always looking at that because my personal belief is that work gives us a lot of gratification and purpose and all kinds of things that help us actually live longer.
Absolutely. And so that's why I think the third age is so wonderful, because we were trained to believe that it's a binary choice. When you hit your 60s, you have to leave the workforce. And now you have this third age where you can say, no, if you really think about it and you're thoughtful and you do the planning for it, and there's a lot of mindfulness and intentionality that has to go into this that, you know, we weren't taught to think about. We were just taught, hey, when I get 30 years in and I'm a certain age, they're going to give me the watch and I have to go. That's not necessarily true. You now have this 30-year bonus where you're wiser than you've ever been. You have, whether you think you have a lot or you think you have a little, you have more financial resources usually than you've ever been, than you've ever had before. And you have, in a lot of cases, unfortunately it's not this case for everyone, you have no obligations to anyone other than yourself. So you have this newfound freedom you've never had, and you can carve out whatever you want to do.
Yeah, I might question that one a little, only because I have a 24 and 27-year-old, and most people that I know are still helping to support their kids.
True.
So
that is true.
And they're all like a little astonished at that too. Like there's not only is 65 ingrained in our brains, but there's something about, I mean, I was independent when I was 18, but kids today can't. I mean, economically, the math doesn't work.
It doesn't. When you're looking at the rate of compensation over the last 3 decades has been much less than the cost, the rate of inflation as a cost for an education. So many of them have student loans.
Yeah.
The cost of housing has gone up at a higher rate of inflation than compensation.
Yeah.
So buying your first home,
You can't rent an apartment at that age on a beginning salary.
So I was speaking with a client this morning, and we were having this conversation. He said, I have a friend I want to introduce you to, and we started talking about what that French children do for professions. These are high, 6-figure jobs,
right.
High in terms of, what your starting salary is out in your 30s.
Absolutely.
I mean, so they're making very good money, and but they live in markets like California and New York, and so the conversation is about they cannot afford a home on their own.
Yeah.
Right. So it is a stressful period because not only do you worry about what your future is, but you're hoping that they have a better future than the generations before them, and it's very stressful.
Yeah, it is interesting because even for me, I mean, I'm conscious of the fact that money that I'm spending on them could be invested for my own retirement, and I'm making a conscious choice to just push that. But I guess what you're saying is, if we have a longer opportunity to work too, then the whole thing just gets extended. We take care of kids a little longer and we work a little longer, and maybe it works out. I don't know.
If you care to, but the nice thing is you have that option to do that. And you do career coaching, but a lot of people don't realize that you don't have to end a career if you're enjoying it. Now, there are a number of cases where, people, their work brings them frustration, anxiety, and, depression, things like that, and you should exit. But I think it's not until you get to the end of a career that you recognize the non-financial benefits of work. When we start our careers, we're looking at, we need work for economic value. I got to pay my bills, right? And then you get towards the end of it and you realize that, work provides, 3 other things. Wow. For no other reason, work gives you something to aspire to. Who doesn't like getting accolades for accomplishing something, right? And so, if you're at work and, people recognize you for being good at what you do, or, you are with a company that has a stamp of excellence on it, and so you're known in your community for being associated with that brand or whatever, that provides you a lot of psychological fulfillment, right? And so one of the challenges going into retirement is, how do I replace that?
Which is a lot like being a stay-at-home mom, because I left 15 years in corporate to, be home with my kids for a little while. And that was one of the big things I noticed is like nobody notices what you're doing. Nobody appreciates. I mean, kids aren't supposed to appreciate, but it's very, you're isolated and you lose all that. And I never even thought about it that much until I lost it. And then I'm like.
Absolutely. And so it's probably 20 years later when you get a great Mother's Day gift that you get acknowledged, but in the moment you don't, right?
Right.
The second one is socialization, right?
Yeah, sure.
Regardless of what you think about certain people at work, even, a lot of people, and I'm very fortunate. I have colleagues that I enjoy working with. I'm sure you do too. But even if that is not your reality, the colleagues that you don't enjoy working with gives you something to laugh about when you get home. Like, can you believe what Bob did again today, right? And so there's a socialization as well as psychological success that comes from working. And the third thing, in addition to economic resources, work provides you structure in your day.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Yes, and I think a lot of people don't understand that, replacing that structure can be very difficult.
Really hard. I remember my dad going through this when he retired, and he didn't retire until he was in his 70s. But he would tell me all the time, gosh, I wake up and the next thing you know, it's 4:00. And I'm like, well, Dad, that's because you don't have any routine anymore.
Absolutely. And then sometimes what I learned in my studies was a lot of people don't envy their friends in retirement. Now, they do really recognize that they have a freedom of time that they wish they could have sometimes, so wish I could take a longer vacation.
Right.
But what they recognize is a lot of their friends are doing things to fill their day, but don't make them feel fulfilled during their day.
Right.
And so when we start talking about this retirement transition, it is very important from a money matter standpoint, simply because you can burn up a lot of money trying to find yourself and try to find something fulfilling to do.
Yeah.
So I think back to when I was starting my studies, I was trying to figure out, because we're living longer, so we say, okay, now I got a period of time where people are going to have 20, 30 years with opportunities and have financial resources. And give me an example of where that's ever existed. It took a while, and I said, professional athletes. So you retire from the game in your late 20s or somewhere in your 30s, right? And you have 20 to 30 years ahead of you. You have the financial resources to do it. You have a network of friends, but you see dysfunctional behavior occur. And today's retiree is starting to look a lot like what we've seen
Interesting.
in professional athletes. If you don't find a way to replace your career identity with that new thing that you aspire to. So we always need psychological success. And the more we can identify what our retirement vision is and aspire to it, the less we're going to spend burning up resources that we've saved trying to figure it out.
That's very interesting too.
So a lot of people will go buy the hot sports car or whatever, and they just can't find themselves. We find that clients tend to stay within their economic means when they've already established what that will look like.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I love this conversation, and it's all still tricky to plan for, I think, because you really don't know what state you'll be in. I mean, I've talked to a lot of people who are making more money in retirement. They've gone either into something entrepreneurial or they're consulting, and they're like, I'm making more money now working fewer hours and having all the flexibility I want than I ever did in my career.
Right.
And then, but that's not for everybody. But I do see that as a nice option that maybe our parents or grandparents didn't have.
So entrepreneurs are actually more successful after the age 50 than earlier in life. And it's because of the wisdom that comes along with it.
Yeah.
And so I encourage people to not necessarily take on the stress in entrepreneurship, but if you can figure out what's a good side hustle, which many people do, then I often have them come back to me and say, wow, this was better than being at work. And so my one of my first understandings of this is I noticed that the company that I worked for, the people that were the happiest clients were the people who came back and consulted for the company, but they got to pick their terms. So they said, give me project work that lasts 3 months because I don't want to be bothered in the summer, or give me project work that only goes 3 days a week because I want to volunteer during the week.
Yeah.
That's kind of hard to do given where some of our policy is in terms of employment law and things like that. So a lot of employers understand that this is a good thing because you get people who in the workforce who actually retirees score very high on what is called generativity, and that is your desire to help younger people along the way. So they get a lot of good mentoring and coaching, and able to keep people who can hold institutional knowledge and pass it in a longer period of time.
Okay.
However, employers are scared to make this offer because if I ask you when you're going to retire, I could get in trouble for ageism.
Oh.
And employees are afraid to make this offer. One, many don't know that have never thought about making an offer, right? Because employment has always seemed like a unilateral contract, right? The employer has all the rights and you come in and you follow the rules and you get a paycheck versus you raising your hand and say, I want to do something a little bit differently.
Yeah.
So it's very hard to get to this happy medium, but I've seen some people make that negotiation and do very well.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so interesting. And what you bring up is the point that you can initiate this. I mean, you might have to go to the previous employer and talk about this, but yeah, interesting. So, okay, so we have this extra, set of years, 20, 30 years that we're now being gifted. So, from a financial standpoint, of course, we don't know what our health is going to be. We don't know that, who we're may be taking care of. Because you are a certified financial planner, so how do we make these assumptions about what to expect?
Well, I start with what you can expect, right? Because I think what people And when people get locked in what they think they're supposed to do, that's what causes a lot of fear. So a lot of people look at themselves as maybe being financial failures because I watched my grandfather do it and he never had any financial anxiety. I watched my grandmother do it. She never had any financial anxiety. Well, your grandmother had the benefit of a defined benefit plan, which guaranteed them a pension. They also lived in an economic time where there was less inflation. Name all of the above. And so what I spend time doing is just going back and explaining the history of retirement and how we got here. And so retirement systems in the 20th century, so we're early 1900s when we start going into manufacturing, this wasn't, a lot of people go, well, my folks had this great pension plan. I hope you understand, and I want everybody to understand that was kind of an anomaly.
Yeah.
It was never supposed to be a design where they were supposed to live 10 years longer than they did and have all this financial safety net. Really, when retirement systems were put in place, it was a negotiation between management and labor. Because it was assembly line and it was really more physical work, management wanted younger employees.
Interesting.
And unions wanted older employees to be taken care of and not to go into poverty. And so this is where you had this happy medium. And so when people were retired, it was more like the company was paying them to go away. And so what happened was there was this negative connotation around retirement because it just basically said you're old and you don't have
to put you out to pasture.
We're putting you out to pasture. And it's the word retirement because the word tired is embedded in retirement.
Oh, boy. Yeah.
And so a lot of people got this negativity felt this negativity around it. Where it started to become positive was around, let's say, about 1970s or whatever, when people started realizing that management had cut this deal and gave them a lifetime benefit. And guess what? I'm living longer now, so I'm winning.
Right.
And so people started to look at retirees and going, hey, John did it right, or Sally did it right because she got her employer to let her go at age 55 or 60 or whatever, and they got to pay her for the rest of her. And so he was like, how do I cut a 20-year deal?
Well, and just to interrupt for a second, I mean, maybe because you've done more research on this, but were people happy in their jobs then? Like, my image of that era is there were a few people who were, happy and fulfilled by their work, but most people were doing work just for the money and waiting for the weekends. And I don't know, but this is in my head. I don't know.
There were people happy in their roles. I think where people started to become unhappy is when the environment became more like we're pushing you out because you're old. But if you go back and you start looking at maybe 19th century retirement or 16th century retirement, So the first,
I've never thought about it that far back.
The first retirement plans were informal. It was basically you had a family that had a farm, and dad got old, and so he went to his sons. And unfortunately, it's a shame, but women couldn't have property rights back then, so he went to his sons instead of going to his sons and his daughters, as we would like to believe would happen today. And he would say, "Look. You know what? I don't have the physical ability to do the things I used to do around here. So as a trade-off, I'm going to deed my property to you. In exchange, you're going to let me live here, and you're going to take care of me for the rest of my life." So those were the first retirement plans. They were informal.
Yeah.
However, what occurred then was because dad or your uncle or whoever was very good at what they do, there was a respect for the wisdom of elders in the workplace.
Yeah.
Okay. So you think about it. Benjamin Franklin signed the Declaration of Independence when he was 87. There once upon a time was this great respect for having older people in the workplace.
Yeah.
What happened when we got to the manufacturing era, we got into management science. And so when management science came into place, we started timing how quickly people could do things. And so wisdom had no value. There was just this playbook put into the workplace and say, either you can do A, B, and C, or you can't, and therefore you're not valuable.
Do you feel like that's sort of coming back with AI? That kind of makes me feel...
I never thought about that, but that could be scary. Yeah. Maybe not. The good news is we're more of a service economy, so intellectual capital means more.
Yeah.
So we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, okay.
So what I've said all of that to get to the point where I think a lot of people are entering into retirement now with expectations of people in the past, which makes them feel like they maybe have underachieved in a lot of cases. And the reality is none of this is the same.
Yeah.
And what occurred in the past was kind of a fluke, for lack of a better word. And we have to reset and set a path for ourselves. And that path will be unique to you, and it will be a great one if you address it.
Oh, I love that. That's such a positive way to look at it, which I love. Yeah, and so, I mean, one of my takeaways is that we have much more control than we really realize, and we
Absolutely.
shouldn't be kind of having voices in our head about, you know, the way the past was, sort of, you know, making us feel like we're more limited than we are.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so how do you address this with clients, for
You know,
example?
I'm amazed the number of people that walk into my office, and so this is, you know, you're in your 50s, you're 50 to 60.
Is that the typical age where you're seeing people come in?
Research shows that that's when people start to think about retirement. Now, we all should be planning for it as soon as we enter into the workforce,
Yeah.
but when it becomes a reality and people start to address it is about age 50.
Okay.
And so it always amazes me, because I think what happens and what some literature shows is because you're not thinking, you know, you're supposed to put something in your 401k and everybody's not able to do that or
Right.
whatever. And so what happens is I get this 50 to 60-year-old group that normally comes in and they're going, we're hoping this is all right. But they have
You
never
mean what they have?
what they have. They've never sat down and done a calculation. They've
Yeah.
never done anything. They're just like hoping it's not too late.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
And so when I lead in my presentations to clients, I've learned that I just tell them the punchline first. Right? Why make them sit through a 40-minute presentation to
Right.
get to the end, and they're sitting there pinning the needles and they're sweating. Worried about it. So what I like to say is, as soon as they walk in the door, look, we looked at your situation. I think it's going to be fine.
What if you don't think it's going to be fine? Then what do you tell them?
And that's a very good question. It's okay if it's not going to be fine, because guess what? You're 50 and now we have
Yeah.
10, 20 years to plan for this, right?
Okay, right.
To correct the course. I think where the problem comes in is that people will hold on to this fear, anxiety, because they won't come in for us to come up with a plan or a strategy to correct the course.
Right. Right. And they don't come in for what, I mean, I see people just being afraid, being ashamed, feeling like I don't know what questions to ask, or if I do ask questions, they're going to look at me like I'm not smart.
Right.
I mean, are you finding other reasons for them to not come in?
So that is true. And so what I like to tell people is to take you're not abnormal. And I think we confuse people who have a lot of money as people who are financially savvy. There are a lot of people that know how to make money, but really aren't very financially savvy, or may not even be financially literate.
I'm really glad you brought that up, because they're not necessarily even that smart. I mean,
Right.
I think people think, oh, when you're really smart, somehow that translates into being really great with money, which
Right.
there are people who have a lot of money and people who have no money who are, I hate to use the word smart, but, for lack of a better one, it doesn't, those two aren't correlated. Really.
Not at all. Not at all. And people think they are, or they look at their neighbor across the street that has a new car and a big house and all that, and they're like, oh, they must be rolling in the dough. They must be really good at it. Not necessarily the case, right? They have a lot of resources, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they know any more about money than you do.
Well, sometimes they don't even have the resources. I live in Malibu. There's a lot of people with a lot of nice cars who actually don't have any liquid
That's exactly
funds.
right. And so there was a study a few years ago done by the University of Chicago where they came out with only about 40% of Americans are financially literate. And that was based on just 5 basic questions, such as, do you know what compound interest is? Or, do you know what... how to calculate your mortgage payment or something like that. Just very, very simple stuff. And so what I try to explain to people is, this is not on you. It doesn't mean that you're not smart. This is more of as a society, we took things like economics out of schools. And so at a very early age, you just weren't introduced to it.
Right.
And if you came from, and this is the interesting thing to me is, it doesn't really matter what your financial background was growing up, right?
Right.
There were a number of reasons not to have this discussion. So if you were from an affluent family, maybe you didn't talk about money because you didn't want your kids going out telling the world what you had, right? Or you didn't want people knowing that you had it or knowing that they had it because you didn't know who would target you because you were affluent.
Right.
Same cases if you didn't come from economic resources, you may not have talked about money around the dinner table because it was the source of a fight. There was scarcity, right? And so what I find is it really doesn't matter the socioeconomic place that you're in or come from. This is just a global problem.
Which is huge because a lot of people do look back and think, they project whatever their earlier life was onto their future. And so they think if they grew up a certain way or there was whatever. And some of it's ingrained early on. And so if your parents were fighting about money, there's a decent likelihood if you stay unconscious about it that you'll also be fighting with your partner at some point. But as soon as you have the recognition of what you just said, you're like released from all of this.
That's exactly right. I'm normal. I didn't do anything wrong. And then you find a trusted advisor to work with and to coach you out, as well as, there's some things you do on your own to increase your literacy. So I tell people, and they say, well, what can I do and read? And I said, you know what? Don't be afraid to go and read children's books on money. If that's your starting point, that's fine. It doesn't. I
love that you tell people that.
Start at the most primary level that makes sense to you, and you work your way up.
Yeah.
Listen to podcasts like yours. Read, go to seminars and things like that. But work at a pace that you can understand and you feel comfortable with, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think the acknowledgement that we do have this financial literacy problem. I don't know if there are other countries where it's taught better than it is here, but here we certainly have a problem. And I think more people are talking about it all the time. And, I've had people on the show who are bringing it into schools. It's still biased information. I feel like it depends on who's delivering it, like the message, even the unsaid message, the things that you just...
Well, and that's what I like. Yes, I'm a wealth advisor, but I also try to separate myself as a scholar, right? I never want to come in and have this conversation under the guise of I'm trying to sell a product. And so that's why I appreciate the opportunity to be on shows like this where we don't mention any of that other stuff. We just talk about the psychology around money, and we try to, my personal goal is to try to change retirement. Right, that make people understand what they really have, view it as glass half full more so than glass half empty.
Yeah. So I love that, and so you're creating a positive look at retirement. Where my own bias is that I don't know. I guess I'm just not dying to retire, so I don't look at it that way. I sort of.
So why do you have to leave?
You don't. No,
right.
I agree.
We've been conditioned to believe that if you're enjoying what you do, just keep doing it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And I guess as I think about this more as you're talking, you do start to doubt yourself because you feel like you yourself are sort of aging out and maybe you're not as interesting or current. I mean, people have suggested that I help teenagers or people in their young 20s. And I always think, well, I look at how my own kids would prefer to learn from like TikTokers, And so that's a mindset too, though, when you start feeling like who's going to be listening to me if I'm 75 and they can listen to a 35-year-old, but that's another problem. But it's just interesting that comes up.
Not true. So I did a show for someone else a couple weeks ago. And so I was explaining some of the things that you can do if you want to call it retirement. You don't have to call it retirement that people just don't think about. So, for instance, we talked about entrepreneurship. Actually, people over 50 make the best entrepreneurs. Right?
Yeah.
So why not give it a try? As long as you're not putting your personal nest egg at risk,
I was just going to ask about that.
Why not go have a fun? So I always tell people, if you can make sure that you do things such as if there's any business risks, have a conversation with an attorney, an insurance agent, make sure that you have the appropriate coverages and things like that. Go ahead and try it. But this is not supposed to put your nest egg at rest, but if you find that you have a side hustle that you find fun. So, for instance, I have a friend who likes to take photos, loves to just go around the world with a backpack, 2-star hotel, comes back. And so one day we go, Jim, why don't you sell these? So every time he comes back, now he has an art show, and so that became his side hustle.
Yeah,
and
I love that.
so how you do that? People don't understand that they could join the Peace Corps. There's no age limit, and
I hope that's still
if you want to see the world on somebody else's dime, as well as get health insurance paid for, it is hard work.
Yeah,
but if you're adventurous
cool,
that
though.
way,
Yeah,
right. So the oldest person I can find a record was 87.
Wow,
That's a path
so
that's
cool.
available to you.
Yeah.
Right.
That brings up an interesting point, too, because I do think people don't necessarily know how to separate that personal nest egg from, how do you, if you think you're going to retire and want to go back to school or start a business or do whatever, do you plan to have a special savings or something for those things? Because otherwise you will be dipping into.
Yeah, I think you need to think about it. But think of what we do every day as advisors is risk management. A lot of people think it's getting the biggest return. No, I'm trying to get a nice return for taking the least amount of risk. Same thing as you go into business. You're in business. I run a business. It's risk management, right?
Yeah.
And so people have to be comfortable thinking in those terms and develop the confidence to feel good about it.
So somebody's going along in their life and they are 50, 55, and they come in and talk to you about maybe they do like their work, so they're not dying to get out, they're not dying to stay, they're sort of like just trying to make the best financial decision as to when to leave. How do you assess that?
Well, you have to develop a vision. And then most important thing is if you have a partner, it has to be a shared vision too.
Oh, good point.
Because a lot of times people develop this vision and it has nothing to do with the other person's vision, and then you have a problem, right? So it has to be a shared vision. And so the interesting thing I find about the retirement decision is, and this is something that came out of my research that I was, you may not find it fascinating. I find it fascinating. So think back, what is your earliest memory of someone asking you what you want to be when you grew up?
Oh, little.
Yeah. So you're like 4 or 5 years old when people start asking what you want to be. And then you go to school, right? And then all of a sudden you get like to high school and there's a counselor that helps you think about what you want to be, right? And then you get to college and there's someone else, and then you get to your career and then there's a mentor that you're assigned to, a buddy or whatever in the work environment. Who helps you make the decision to exit?
Yeah, maybe your employer, that's about it.
If it's a forced one, but there's never any planning.
That's a really good point.
In terms of professional development after you hit a certain age or stage,
Yeah,
usually
so
around late
true.
40s
That
to
is
50s, right?
fascinating.
And so what I found was the retirement decision creates a lot of anxiety because for a lot of people, this is the first independent career decision they've ever made.
Wow, that's so interesting, but so true.
Think about it. Like, I was interviewing a gentleman, and he worked for the same company for 50 years. And in an interview, I said, why haven't you thought about retirement before? And he was like, because no one's told me. And so he went in and explained to me throughout his career, every promotion he ever got, every movie he ever made, is because someone in the corporation said, I think you would be great at this. And so it's like, no one has come and told me what the next thing to go to is. They're telling me I can retire from this, but they're not telling me what to retire to. Yeah. So he says, until, I can get some guidance and help and understanding on what that next thing is, I'm just not going to do anything. And so this, to me, and then I start to interview more people and ask the question, a lot of people were in careers that it was never their intention to be in. They were, you wake up one day and say, well, I'm an accountant.
True.
My dad was an accountant. His dad was an accountant, so I'm an accountant.
Yeah.
And so trying to find vision around something, especially when your livelihood is tied to, is very hard for a lot of people.
It is
because
hard.
They've never had to do it before.
Even in my own business, because all entrepreneurs need a vision. It's hard. It's hard to get clear. You can have a general, overall vague kind of vision, but when you really want to break it down so that you could clearly see it in your mind's eye, it's hard. It's hard to, part of it's hard to accept that you can want these things.
Right.
So that's a little bit of a
Right.
nuance there, but yeah, so interesting. So how would you kind of describe your role in this? I mean, it almost sounds, I mean, I know you're a financial planner, but in a way you sound like a coach too. I mean,
When I go back to the conversation I was having with my company in 2008 and was not getting a lot of receptivity, so I decided to do this independently. And what I was trying to explain is there's a psychology to this, and we all coach, right? And that's just as important as us getting the cash flow calculation correct, right? I was out on an island by myself at that point in time, and then I think maybe 2 or 3 years ago, now the CFP exam is 11% is psychology.
wow, that's
So we are evolving.
interesting. Yeah.
We are evolving, but it's just going to take a little bit of time, and I think you probably are ahead of the curve in your foresight by having these topics out there, but we need to get there.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. And I feel like we are getting there. A lot of times when I talk about it, I almost feel like, oh my gosh, I know you've heard this before, like all these things from your childhood that you're now reliving. But the reality is it's still news to a lot of people, I find.
It is still news to a lot of people. And I also think one of the things that we have to be conscientious of is that even though we didn't have these conversations growing up, there were nonverbal cues given to us.
For sure. Yeah.
Okay. And so, and these nonverbal cues won't be given to the next generation simply because we do a lot of transactions electronically now. So my parents may not have talked to me about advocating for myself when it came to money, but if I went with my father to Sears to buy a television, he would always go, hey, can you give me a discount if I take the floor model instead of the one you're going to give me in the box, right?
Right.
We don't see that anymore. We used to see our parents sit at the table with with a checkbook and write out checks every day.
My mom taught me how to write the checks, taught me how to balance the little register thing. Yeah, I remember that vividly. It was an important discussion in her mind.
Right. But now we pay bills over an app now. So the nonverbal, we think that we lack financial literacy. Imagine if you don't even get those nonverbal cues growing up anymore. So we really need to address this.
Yeah, and there are some basics that, I mean, even my son is a great investor. Like, he's way better than me at understanding all the stuff. But he asked me one day, can I open a second checking account? Like, it was that basic. Like, he had a checking account. He didn't know he could have multiple checking accounts. So it's funny what questions come up, that, I don't know. I find this topic fascinating. I love this. So I hate that we're getting close to our time here, but how, can you tell people how to find you, why to find you, what state they, where are they? What questions are they asking
Well,
themselves?
if you want to learn a little bit more about my findings, I have a book called Exit from Work that can be found on Amazon.
Okay.
That's one way. Also, you can reach me at my firm, Mesirow.com. That's another way, as well as I have a number of publications out there where from time to time I'll do a quick article, things like that.
Okay.
You can find those on the Mesirow website as well.
Okay. And do you help people around the country, or is it?
Yes, I have clients across the country.
Okay.
So always happy to come to a geographic region for a discussion. Absolutely.
Okay. And so if somebody comes to you, maybe they're in their 40s, 50s, 60s. I mean, do you have people coming to you later in life and starting this conversation?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So how do you begin? Do you lay out some kind of, you get all the data, and do you lay out a financial plan with them?
Yeah, so we have a conversation, but I like to start the first conversation, which is what we call discovery, and that is for me to discover. And a lot of people will say, I just want to know how to put together a balance sheet for me. No, I really want to know what your likes, your dislikes are, what your first experience with money is. I need to understand how to coach you. Right. It's just like playing a sport. Some people respond to the coach that's a yeller screamer. Some people just respond to the coach better that exercises empathy. You have to know where people's sensitivities are. The last thing I want to do is feel like the person that is crushing your dream, right?
Yeah.
Simply because I can't communicate in the most effective style, right?
Yeah.
So, for instance, I had a friend call me 6 months ago, and she's like, you got to be my advisor. I can't. And so I read what her advisor had put through, and I said, you know what? This is a rock solid plan. Everything your advisor has told you to do, I don't disagree with any of it. And she says, Yes, but the relationship, when we get together, the way he makes me feel.
So interesting.
The way he makes me feel, the way I feel like I'm being shamed every time we talk.
Oh my gosh, that comes up so often. And it's like, why does the industry not get it? Like, this isn't working for you.
I don't know. So my thing is, I want to know you personally as well, so I can help you flourish. And so one of my clients, who's also a friend, went through a divorce, and so she's like, my husband handled everything, and I need to get financially literate. And so we were finishing after I think our first year together, and I said, how do you feel? She says, I feel better. And I said, that's not good enough. I want you to feel empowered.
Yeah,
Right?
that's great.
Yeah. So basically, we're going to take basic steps depending on where you are. Like I said, if it's as simple as you just need to read children's books, we'll get you there, right?
Yeah.
But I want you to feel empowered. There's nothing better than having financial self-efficacy. A lot of people feel as though I'm just going to give you the answer and you should be happy with it. No, I want you to feel empowered. And a lot of people feel like if I empower you, then you won't need me anymore. I don't think that's the case. I think if I empower you, you appreciate me more.
Right.
Yeah.
I totally agree. And there's always, life is complicated these days. So there are always going to be new things that come up, and you're always going to need your financial team.
That's right. So, when people say, hey, what should I be doing? Listen to Michelle's podcast.
Thank you.
Right?
That.
Listen, read this, read that. I'm not threatened by that in any way. At the end of the day, what we're trying to do is bring up literacy skills and make people feel empowered.
Yeah. And that's just the beginning. Once you get those literacy skills down, then you can get interested in whatever areas of finance. Maybe you want to learn to invest. Maybe you want to buy real estate. Maybe,
That's right.
But you really, unless you have that foundational understanding of things, that's not going to go well either.
Right.
Hate to end on that. I don't want to, will not end on that. Anyway, well, this has been great. Thank you. And
I've enjoyed it as well.
I think it's so interesting that we really don't get help. Like when you explain that about everybody coaching us along until we get to this point. And I just think that's brilliant. And it's so important for people to recognize that and talk to somebody and get help in that. So, yeah. Well, thank you for being here. Thank you for coming into the studio and having this great discussion. And again, the name of your book?
Exit from Work.
Thank you. I'll put that in the show notes. And that sounds great. I'll be reading that as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, these topics are interesting. We don't give them enough thought. When I think one real benefit of shows like this, or everybody's podcasts, is that instead of just sort of glossing over these big, aspects of life, we're talking about them, and then people realize, oh, this is something that I need to give some thought to.
That's right.
So yeah, I kind of love the podcast world for that. Okay, well, again, thank you. Thank you for the work you do. Thank you for being here. And thank you, audience, for listening to the show. We love it when you show up for the Money and You show, and we are here every week. So you can subscribe on the Limit Free Life YouTube channel. You can find us on all the podcast platforms. So if you like the show, if you know somebody who needs to hear this great information on retirement, please share the show with them. And if you will rate and review the show, then we can have more wonderful guests like Dr. Gregg Lunceford on the show with us. So thank you so much. We'll see you next week.